Welcome everyone to the third session of Included 2021. One of our 6 sessions live, or if you're watching on YouTube, we say welcome as we continue on our journey of remember, renew, and reimagine. Now, my name's Katie. I am an officer here in Australia, in Melbourne, and I'm joined with the fabulous co-host Vicky, who's from very north up in Darwin. So question, did you know that you are part of a global movement? The Included team here and you that are participating today come from across the world, places like Iceland, Denmark, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, United Kingdom, United States, South America, New Zealand, and Australia. So good job. So very important for some of these countries to truly be a space of inclusion, we need to take a moment and acknowledge the people who are the traditional custodians of the land and seas, the First Nations people. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but for the United States right now, in the month of November, is Native American Month. And for Australia and New Zealand, we are continuing to grow our respect for our First Nations people. So right now, wherever you are, whatever lands you are meeting on, we want to take this moment to acknowledge the first people of those lands. For myself, I want to acknowledge I meet on the Kulin Nation lands, the traditional custodians, the Bunurong and the Wurundjeri people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And for us as a Salvation Army, we want to work for reconciliation and justice alongside Australia's First Nations people.
I'm going to do an introduction or a welcome to country that's Kiwi inspired. So tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. We acknowledge the lands upon which we meet today, including the Māori, as the original custodians of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and other Indigenous peoples on the lands upon which we all meet across the world today. We pay our respects to their ancestors and elders, past and present, and pray for their future generations to be great warriors for the kingdom of God and for their people.
Amen. So we have been so blessed already. I don't know if you guys have had the chance to join us for our sessions. Session 1, we had Kathy took us on this incredibly powerful journey of how we've come to have the word homosexual in the Bible and why this needs to be relooked at. In session 2, Dale challenged our thinking, what does the Bible actually say? Or more truthfully, what it doesn't. So if you've missed those 2 sessions, would encourage you in 2 weeks, we're going to post up all our recordings, and I just really encourage you to go back and watch some of those sessions. They're great stuff. Now for this session, Session 3, we have the incredible privilege to be joined by Anthony Venn Brown. Anthony is the author of A Life of Unlearning, amazing book. Encourage you to check it out. And he brings insight, there he is. He brings incredible insight, wisdom, and firsthand experience of the impact of conversion therapy, known to many, unfortunately, as the pray away the gay movement. Now, Anthony last year received the Order of Australia for his work with victims of conversion practice, and he is a political activist trying to ban the practice. Now, we are also blessed to have the fabulous Brad Watson who's joining us, an officer serving here in Australia who's bravely and courageously going to share his personal experience. There he is. Share his journey in this conversion practice. So I don't know about you guys, but I am pumped for this session. I think it's going to be amazing, and we're going to be in for a good ride. But I want us to pause just for a minute, okay? I do want to take a moment to say, if you find this session trigger you, brings up any hurt and pain, please reach out to someone, or you can reach the team here at team@includedpage.com, because we really want to ensure that you do okay, that this is a space that doesn't cause more harm, but brings healing. So really just want to plug, if there's some triggers, let's reach out for some support. Now, let me change my gears slightly. I just want to take a little infomercial to remind us all that this event doesn't happen for free, right? You guys got to come for free. We love our freebies, but there is a cost involved. So we would love if you could jump over to our included page, there it is, and make a donation so it can allow us to continue this great work. We would love to throw in, some steak knives or something, but we can't afford it. That's why we need you to donate. So please, if you can do that, that would be amazing. Now, throughout this session, if you're joining us live or having the opportunity to engage with this conversation, there'll be Q&A and chat and breakout rooms. So to tell us a little bit more about this, I'm going to pass this over to the fabulous Vicky.
Thanks, Katie. So after Anthony does his presentation, should go for about half an hour, we're going to break into, we're going to move to a question and answer time. So this is your opportunity to ask Anthony any burning questions you have or anything that arises from his presentation. Please, in the chat room, if you can select Katie as the person, Katie Chat, select her, and then your questions will go direct to her. So this way we can filter it out and make sure that no one's going to be hurt by anything that's shared. After the Q&A, we will break into our breakout rooms. So we'd love you to come and join with us for a conversation. There will be a quick 5-minute break between the end of the formal part of the session. So you can grab a cuppa or go to the loo, whatever you need to do. And then please come back and join us for an opportunity to share, reflect, and listen to others. Yes. Now we're going to move into a time of prayer and devotion. And we warmly welcome John Val from Denmark to pray for us.
Good morning, everyone, from Denmark here. It's a nice autumn day with sun is shining and leaves are falling and everything is going like it should. And nice colors. I was actually caught by the thought about bearing fruit. And we are called to bear fruit. But also we have to admit that some fruits has been falling on the ground and that is hurting. So I think we'll use that thought when we're going to pray now. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you because you call us to bear fruit. You call us to bear fruit in our personal lives and in our community, in our churches. And we're sorry for all the fruit that has fallen on the ground through the days and years. Please forgive us. And we ask you to help us again and again and again, and in a better way, that we may bear fruit that will honor your kingdom. I ask you to bless everyone listening today and everyone speaking today, and especially Anthony and Brad and everyone else, that your name may be glorified, so the fruit will have the conditions to grow. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your evidence among us. And Holy Spirit, come and heal the wounds. Come and renew our minds and come and nurse us as we gather in your presence. Amen. God bless you all.
When I think of the word remember, I think of the way our colours have been covered up out of shame, out of not understanding that people are different. I think of the trauma and the division that has been caused. When I think of the word renew, I think about renewing what's been stolen or hushed. But recognizing where we've come from. Recognizing that people are still hurting and are still healing. When I think of the word reimagine, I think of a fresh start, of a way to bring everyone together. Where we are all welcome, no matter the colours that we are bringing. We are loved by God and our church the way that we are.
It was a beautiful piece, wasn't it? And so that was done by Spencer, who is a transgender queer in Australia here. And I'm not sure if you've noticed that in all our logos and when you go to Facebook, that colourful image is those three circles we've put together. So we are very blessed to have the wonderful Brad joining us today to be able to share his story. And so we're going to do a bit of a Q&A. But we just want to say that we just want to honour you, Brad, in your bravery to share your story. We hold your story very precious in this space. And I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about you. So to kick us off, why don't you introduce yourself, a bit of your name, your role, and most importantly, Brad, your favourite food.
Yeah, very good. So my name's Brad. I'm from Australia, and as is the custom in Australia, I acknowledge that I'm greeting you from Nipuluna Litruwita, known as Hobart, Tasmania, the lands of the Muanina people, one of the Palawa nations. And I pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. Who am I apart from that? Well, I am a Salvation Army officer. I've been a Salvation Army officer for over 20 years. I currently have a role in the Salvation Army as the head of community engagement programs for the Salvation Army in Australia, which is a pretty out there title that doesn't mean much, but it includes all of our material aid, financial assistance programs, emergency services, our services to the Defence Forces, financial counsellors, our chaplaincy unit, those sort of community engagement programs. I'm 45. I'm a dad of two, an adult daughter, Zoe, and a teenage boy, Dominique. And my favorite food, well, growing up was always Italian. That's always, and particularly a lasagna. But I saw Cedric on the line before. Cedric blessed me once upon a time by letting me serve in India for a little while. And you can't live in Chennai for 3 months without enjoying a good Madras curry.
Very nice. Well, I know you've got quite the story that we could probably spend all night unpacking a little, but we're going to hone in a bit on the question that, knowing what you know about the Salvation Army and of yourself as 21-year-old, what led you to pursue officer training? We're going to land there first.
We're going to start there. Well, that's a huge question. And I'm going to reverse. I'm going to talk about what I knew about myself first, rather than what I knew about the army. I knew that I was questioning at the very least. And let's be honest, I probably knew more than that. But at that time, I would say I was questioning. We all remember our first crush. And for me, Luke Horden, everyone in my year would remember Luke. He was the big basketballer. And very handsome and all that sort of stuff. And so when that's sort of where you come from, you start to think, oh, okay, things aren't the same as the other guys in my year. I did go out with girls at the church because everybody went out with girls at the church. And I went to a pretty big church in Melbourne, a Salvo Corps, where basically everyone was dating everyone at different stages. And I enjoyed the company of the girls that I went out with, but it wasn't quite right, but it was right in what was supposed to be happening. So I ended up with this calling to go into officership amidst all of that. And for me, it was both a growing sense that that was what I was going to do with my life, but also a very sudden calling as well. I'd spoken to 1 or 2 people. I thought this might be it. And then at the time, I was working the Victorian Public Service. For those overseas, that's a government employee. And I went away at Easter time with some of the other public servants that I was working with. And we went up to the Murray River and went on a houseboat for a few days and all this sort of stuff. And to this day, I remember sitting on the back of the boat Easter Sunday morning and thinking, I'm going to be a minister. I'm going to be a Salvation Army officer, and I'm going to college next year. Like, it was just, it was like a statement of fact in my head. And sure enough, that's what happened. And I think in many respects, it was quite separate from everything else that might have been going on in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So we've got Brad wrestling with identity, then feeling the calling to officership. So you head into officership, but at some point you leave the training college and kind of seek therapy, all that. Can you tell us a little bit about that space?
Yeah, for me, I'm going to be upfront. I struggle with the term therapy because there's nothing therapeutic about these practices. And when I started to research in this area as part of my PhD, I actually put it in the very first paragraph on the section on conversion therapies. There is nothing therapeutic about this. When I got to that point, when I got to the first year in college particularly, and then leading into the second, there was a whole heap of low level, well, some of it was low level, some of it wasn't. Conversion therapies for me were not go off to gay school or go to gay camp and really get overpowered. It was the cumulative impact of many experiences that that really screwed with your head. So one of the first ones I remember was a friend of mine. So my home core is Preston in Melbourne, and one of my friends at Preston knew something must be not quite right. So he sat me down and he made me watch a series of videos by a guy named Cy Rogers. Cy Rogers was one of the ex-gays from the United States. So there was a whole contextual issue that was out of place anyway. But I remember watching that, and I remember it being drummed into me about how I should sit, about how my wrists shouldn't be linked, about how my voice shouldn't be pitched too high, about all these things about how I behaved and how I had to be this masculine person because that's who I was meant to be. And not that I probably wasn't masculine, but, you know, I just remember all that stuff about how you had to appear and how you had to behave. And that was sort of one of the early ones. I remember being taken to the South Barwon Corps in Victoria, in Australia, and where people prayed over me and how intensive that was and just crazy that was. I remember the first time I sat in my dad's office, and I think I would have been 22 or 23 by this stage, and actually said, "Hey, Dad, I think I might be gay. I'm not sure where this is going, but there's something I'm questioning. I've been questioning most of my life." And I can still remember him turning around and picking a book off the shelf by Neil Anderson. And in the back of the book, he found the prayer about how you can denounce the lie that homosexuality is what God intended for your life. So that's a very powerful message when your dad gives you the prayer to renounce your sexuality. I remember in first year of college, in Bible college in those days, this is 1997, homosexuality wasn't a theological issue. It wasn't a sociological issue. We covered it as part of ethics. And I remember the teacher coming in to teach on homosexuality in Bible college. And the first thing he said was, "I didn't even know what a gay was until they got kicked out of the military unit I was in." And that's the attitude he was presenting with. And so you can imagine the tone and the nature of that class and where that went from there. Again, my college principal must have suspected something as well, because I can remember a conversation with him where he just said, "You will never be accepted as an officer by any corps if you are dating a man." So there were some intensive experiences like that prayer night. There was educational experiences like those videos, but there was also a consistent messaging over many, many years that included my soldiership classes. I mean, we mentioned battle orders this morning. Thankfully, I didn't do battle orders. I was a little bit older than that, and I did Manual of Salvationism. But even so, some of those materials were just terrible, and you were taught that's how you would be. And then when you became a Corps Cadet leader or a junior soldier leader, that's the material I was given to teach. So then you get this internalized homophobia where you're, and conflict where you're teaching something that you can't because it's not you, and there's this cumulative buildup that accumulates. So yeah, after almost completing college, I did leave for a while. Now, there were lots of reasons I left in the end. But after another year out, the calling hadn't changed. And I had this true belief, this honest belief, God's going to work all this out. If this is what God wants for me, he's going to work all this out. He's going to straighten me out, pun intended. He's going to, you know, he's going to heal this. It's all going to be good.
Wow. I don't know, just hearing that part of your life, I feel like I need to take a breath. That's pretty amazing. So let's fast forward. You're what, 20 years into now being an officer. Can you talk a little bit of what are some of the impacts that of those early stages has made for your journey continuing on the next 20 years?
Well, when you sent me that question, the first word I wrote down was hypervigilance. And I think that has dominated most of my young adulthood. That almost post-traumatic response where you're very, very conscious of everything. So hypervigilance, I think, is the first thing that really did come to mind. There's a lot of other practical impacts. I married, and I'm not going to go into that because that's a shared journey, and I want to show grace to Angela, my ex-wife, who's an amazing person. I loved her. I love her now. We co-parent our children together, but I'm not going to discuss the journey because she needs to be able to tell her story too. But suffice to say, that means that I'm not the only one that gets hurt by this. Other people get hurt by this. There's always fallout that goes to families and to other people. I'm still a bit defensive. I was still watching my back and my social media and all sorts of things like that. There were 2 suicidal episodes in my life, which thankfully I'm beyond now, but I'll forever be grateful to God for the first one. I was about to drive my car off the Midland Highway and a truck flew past and a stone smashed into my windscreen and snapped me out of it. Now, not many people thank God for a smashed windscreen, but it just snapped me out of the ideation that I was experiencing. And in the other occasion, I just had a friend who came around and sat with me. It was just incredible. So there was that. Look, I spent 5 years in psychology treatment, working through this stuff, working through internalized homophobia, working through guilt and shame. There's still a way to go with some of that, but I'm a much more whole person. I'm functioning, which is grace of God again that I'm functioning. So, yeah. I mean, there were impacts through ministry too. There's some really hard times. Being a divisional youth secretary in South Australia, when teenagers come to you to talk about the struggles they're having, and knowing how messed up your head has been at different times in your life. At the time, I thought it was just so difficult to deal with. Now I actually think God called me for those moments so that someone was there that would receive those kids. Being in core appointments, I was a core officer in a team environment, but at a large conservative core in Western Australia. And at times the conversations around same-sex relationships in that core become quite bitter and quite nasty. We're talking, letters to the commissioner and all sorts of different things. So that was hard. But some of the impacts have been really positive too. I've got 2 amazing kids. I really do. Zoe and Dominique are just amazing. There's been healing of relationships. After I went through the indignity of coming out to everybody the second time, my dad wrote this incredibly healing letter that I've saved. And, we've had not many, but 1 or 2 really significant chats about our shared experience of this. There's been others that have come back to me. It was only 2 weeks ago, I got an email from my college principal to affirm me in the new role that I'm in with the Salvation Army in Australia now, and ask me that when I'm in Melbourne, can we catch up for coffee to talk about what happened in college? So again, that's a really healing thing for something that happened in, like I said, 1997, 1998. And I actually find that while I would never want this or wish this on anyone, one positive is that I now have voice. The circumstances when I took on this appointment meant that one of the other heads of department at our THQ had to take leave about 2 weeks after I started. And I picked up some of the things that she was dealing with, which included some aspects of our Rainbow Tick accreditation and some included work and some training work at our headquarters. And so having someone with lived experience in that space, I don't believe is an accident. And I'm not in this role for that, but it's a nice thing where a positive impact is that I can speak into that space. So there's been some positives too.
Well, I definitely want to say that we're so glad you're still here. First off, Brad, I'm glad that you're around and that you've found a voice. I think that's one of the most beautiful things for people when we find our voice. I thank you for your story and that you've found hope amongst some very messy spaces. So we really appreciate you sharing your testimony with us all today. We thank you for your bravery, and we know that you sharing your voice with us is going to inspire others to be brave as well. So we want to thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thanks, Katie. And it's a real privilege to share tonight with you and with fellow Melburnians, Spencer and Jason, who's going to sing a bit later, and with Anthony. During the time when a lot of my world was falling apart, I'm sure Anthony doesn't even remember this, but I'd read his book and I emailed him, and he was so gracious and responded to my emails and was just lovely. So it's a real privilege and honor for me to be on the same night as Anthony. So,
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you, Brad. It's now my privilege to introduce you to Anthony Venn Brown, who has received an Order of Australian Merit for his work with victims of sexuality conversion practices and his political activism trying to ban these practices. He's the founder of his organisations, including ABBY, which is Ambassadors and Bridge Builders International, and Freedom to Be. And he's the author of the book, A Life of Unlearning, a preacher's struggle with his homosexuality, church and faith. So we look forward to hearing all you have to say today, Anthony, on conversion practices. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Vicky, and thanks for the very kind words, Brad. And first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge that I am coming from Gadigal land, the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging as well. And what an absolute honour and privilege to be with you today. I want to give you all a big applause for what you are doing within the Salvation Army movement. In my early Christian life, I did quite a bit of church hopping. I came from an Anglo-Catholic background. I got baptised in a Baptist church. I got involved when the charismatic movement started in Sydney. And I went to Pentecostal church, but I never went to the Salvation Army. The closest ever I got to it, I think, was I was a bugle sergeant at the local cadet band at high school. So I still have a warm place for bands and for marching, which I know a lot of you, that's something a bit of the past. Anyway, and I'm a Penty preacher, well, former Penty preacher, and I'm so used to having people giving me feedback, laughing, engaging, so bouncing off what I'm doing. So I'm trying to do the best I can today to feel like I'm talking to each and every one of you right now in this space and being very, very present with you. So I've got a bit of a presentation to go through here, which I'm going to share my screen. I believe this is what we do here. Maybe it's that one there, share. Let's see if this is going to work properly. Hopefully you can see that, everybody. Yes, I've got people nodding. The trick will be if it keeps moving in the right way. That'll be the trick which I've had trouble with before. So I'm going to give you quite a bit of information about conversion therapy, and I acknowledge what Brad has said already. So there is no conversion and it isn't therapy. My life mirrors very much the movement, actually, because I was born in 1951. I know I don't look it, but anyway, 1951, I was born at a time when, of course, being gay meant that it was a crime. People went to prison. I hid from the police. I went to a psychiatrist to try and get healed. I went into a Christian residential program in 1972, which was a living program. That was before Exodus was founded. 16 years of marriage, became a high-profile Pentecostal preacher, and then fell in love with a man. Not supposed to happen. So that was the confrontation that made me realize that my 22 years of trying to do everything to change hadn't actually worked, and I could no longer live a lie. There was a public confession that I did in front of about 800 people, which traumatized me so much. It took me years to get over. When I got through all that, several years later, I found resolution of my faith and my sexuality. I felt like I wanted to do something to help, and that's when I began doing this work. So I'm going to give you, first of all, a little bit of an understanding about, first of all, what is conversion therapy. Hopefully that changed. Not if that changed for you. The slide, did it change? Good. Ooh, that's the first time I've done it right. So there are lots of different definitions about this, but to summarize these, firstly, conversion therapy or conversion practices are based on a false belief that a non-heterosexual, transgender or queer identity is abnormal and the result of damaged development. Secondly, the goal of these practices is to change, but not just change, eliminate or suppress a gay, lesbian or bisexual person's orientation or identity, or keep transgender individuals from transitioning from their birth gender. And thirdly, conversion therapy can involve a variety of practices, including personal prayer, informal or formal spiritual counseling by qualified or unqualified individuals, face-to-face or online formal programs and support groups. So that's a summary of the various definitions that are out there, but it's always about conformity to a single belief about sex, that only happens within a heterosexual context and within marriage, and a binary belief about gender, that God created male and female, and that is it. So I'm going to take you through this timeline of how this thing has evolved. And let's start off, first of all, with the 50s and 60s, which is the era that I was growing up. So the terminology that was used, of course, was that people were perverts, deviants. I remember even in primary and high school, I looked up in the dictionary what a homosexual was. It said pervert and deviant. The cause that they believed was about poor parenting, a strong mother, a distant father, mixing with the wrong people. You mix with homosexuals, you can get converted. The practitioners were doctors, surgeons, mental health professionals. The treatments were very, very invasive, medicalized lobotomies, electric shock, aversion therapy. The kinder treatments were psychoanalysis, which you have to be in for years and years and years, and also psychiatry. But of course, the goal was that heterosexuality was the goal. You would be healed and you would end up being normal. Then in 1973, the American Psychiatric Association took the homosexuality off the list of mental disorders, and that started to change everything. And then what happened, of course, was the next thing is that the 70s and 80s, this now transitions into a Christian religious context. So mental health professionals have left that behind, but the church takes it up. Was the church doing this before? No, not involved at all. So this was, the terminology, of course, was a homosexual abomination, same cause, poor parenting, etc. And so the practitioners, ex-gay leaders, pastors, church leaders, and deliverance ministries. So the treatments were, some people believe just got converted, which is what I originally believed, that I'd be free of my homosexuality. Exorcisms, deliverances, prayer, fasting. I did 2 40-day fasts. And there were programs which started like Love in Action, like Exodus started in 1976. And there are many of those individual organizations that were set up. So once again, or should we mention here too that at this period that there were lots of people who believed that homosexuality was actually a choice, which of course is the most ridiculous thing that you could ever come across, that anyone would choose all the hassles and maybe the possible rejection and all the trauma that can come along with being LGBT. So yeah, that's rather crazy. And then we move on to the next period. So there's an evolution going on here. This period here is where they move more into a therapeutic type model. That's where the term reparative therapy came into being. And poor parenting, once again, was supposed to be the cause of this. Sexual abuse as well, trauma and improper development. Once again, ex-gay ministry leaders, pastors, church, and Christian therapists and spiritual healers started to get involved at this stage. Then we come into 2010, 2020. So the terminology changes again into sexually and relationally broken. That's the most common thing. Unwanted same-sex attraction and gender incongruence. Once again, the very same causes. Pastors, church leaders, support groups, Christian therapists, and spiritual healers are the practitioners. And the support groups, discipleship, personal prayer, accountability, same gender, non-sexual relationships are very big within this movement. They're saying one way to overcome this is to build non-sexual relationships with people of the same gender. And of course, self-discipline. The thing that's really changed now is that a lot of these have moved from a change is possible message to a celibacy message. So you can be gay, you just can never, ever act on it. I give this new celibacy movement about 20 years max before it falls over, because what will happen is people, of course, will fall in love. That's what will happen. And it took 40 years for Exodus and the ex-gay movement to realize it was wrong. But it probably took about 20 years, I think, with the celibacy movement to also make change. So the thing that we need to realize is that along here, along the top, I've got these little green arrows, they represent that it isn't all cut and dried, that there is an overlap that happens with these things. Like actually, if you went into many parts of Africa right now, you would find that what is going on is that they're very much in the 70s and 80s mentality, belief, practitioners, and all those sorts of things that are going on in Africa right now. Ghana is a good example. Uganda's been another one, but most of the African countries are struggling with this. So what we see also is that actually the cause has hardly changed at all during that time. Pretty well the same thing. It's all about something that's happened in your past, like poor parenting, and sometimes about sexual abuse, improper development. In these last decades, it's been about identity conflict. I noticed what Brad said, that he went to this, I think it was his dad, and said to his dad, "I think I'm gay." I can guarantee you 99.9% of times when someone says they think they're gay, they are. Okay, so some additional things to note during this time as we've gone through that evolution. I should also mention too that 50s and 60s with all those terrible treatments, that we will often get people very confused that that's what we're talking about when we're talking about conversion therapy or conversion practices. And unfortunately, many people in the media who are uneducated about this will include those sorts of things, which makes it very difficult when we're trying to see the practices stop, because people will say, "I don't believe that still goes on today," but they have no idea about how this is happening within religious contexts. So some additional developments are that the late 90s and early 2000s was the height of the biggest organizations. And here in Australia, we had, at one stage, we had an estimate that I did was about 4 to 5 more organizations per capita in Australia than they have in America. And of course, Brad mentioned Cy Rogers. I'm writing a biography about him currently, which will be interesting when it comes out. And also that I announced in 2012, because I've been monitoring this since 2000, is that 2/3 of the organisations in Australia and in New Zealand had closed down. And the legislation banning the practices began in California, in the US in 2012, and has continued. Various approaches to that began with just for minors, began just with therapists, but now we're getting to a point where we're really getting to where the problem is that it's happening within local churches in formal and informal ways. Exodus closed in 2013. I was really fortunate to actually be at that conference, to hear Alan Chambers say the words, "We're closing down." It was just an incredible moment. And then what happened after that? There was an emergence of what we would say is the LGBTQA plus survivor movement. So lots of young people that maybe had not been a part of an organization, but experienced the same harm and damage because the belief system still existed within local churches and was believed by pastors, youth pastors, church leaders, etc., still had that impact. And then in 2020, last year, the United Nations independent expert called for a global ban on the practice. Now, the reason that this is such an important topic for us to talk about is that the impacts that this has had on people have been horrific. I'm going to be talking to you about from 3 individual sources. One of those was that when I got my act together, or got things sorted out for me personally, in 2000, I started a group called XXGay, Yahoo group. Some of you will remember Yahoo groups, you go back that far as well. So for Yahoo groups, I had over 400 people in that group. These were people who had gone through what we called in that time ex-gay programs and come out the other end, not gay, but also be traumatized, etc. When my autobiography came out, A Life of Unlearning, in 2004, what happened was my inbox was absolutely inundated with emails from individuals like Brad has just mentioned, and I wasn't aware of this, Brad. It's so good to hear you say that. And what they said was, my story is your story. And I answered every one of those emails from readers as they poured their hearts out to me, often for the first time, telling somebody about what they'd been through. And then in 2005, founded Freedom to Be, and we had a network of LGBT people from Christian backgrounds, mostly evangelical, Pentecostal, and some traditional churches as well. And many of those had also been a part of some formal program. So I tried to estimate how many survivors I've worked with over the last 20 years. And I would have to say probably a rough estimate would be about 4,000 survivors. But then again, of course, it's not just about people who are a part of the programs. It's all the other people who have been a part of informal programs or not a program, but have really been impacted by the negative messages about being anti-gay, anti-trans, etc., etc. So what I'm talking about now is from these 20 years of working with all of these people experiencing faith, sexuality, conflict, etc. When we had the Marriage Equality Postal Survey, the impact upon individuals was quite profound in a negative way. And the research indicated that people experienced high levels of anxiety, fear, and it impacted their mental health. Of course, what was happening here was this for us for a limited time. While the first day's postal survey was on, but we need to remember that an LGBT person in an evangelical church or a non-affirming church is actually experiencing this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So this is a little equation I've worked out, is that the belief plus the intensity of the motivation to change multiplied by the time equals the amount of harm. So here are some of the impacts that I listed. I had huge Excel spreadsheet. I kept a track of comments that were made in emails, conversations I had with people, and these were the common themes. So of course, mental health issues of depression, anxiety, and stress. Everyone was experiencing those. There's an intense cognitive dissonance. Only an LGBTQ person can really tell you about how intense that cognitive dissonance can become, because remember that the acceptance or rejection of your sexual orientation or your gender identity has eternal consequences plus more. PTSD is very, very common among survivors of conversion practices, a whole lot of different levels, some mildly, some people don't even know they've got it, but are experiencing it, and some have complex PTSD. Some experience self-destructive behaviors, substance abuse, unsafe sex. Why? Because of the self-hatred and the self-loathing, the internalized homophobia that Brad talked about previously. Also, obsessive behaviors and addictions were not uncommon for guys. That could be pornography, chat rooms, dating apps, sex on premises venues. A whole lot of things could be happening for them. Also, there is this fragmentation of self, so that what happens is the gay self becomes the dark self, and the dark self will get away or will do things that the public self will never ever do. So you end up becoming very much two individual people. Of course, if you are living with this internalized homophobia, you are suffering from poor self-esteem. That can impact, of course, your work, your study, your career, building relationships, a whole lot of things. What I've discovered as well is that the faith and or sexuality conflict can be separate. So somebody can actually accept their sexuality or their gender identity, but their faith is still a seething mass of unresolved conflicts. We think that these things are actually intertwined, and they are, but actually the faith journey and the sexuality journey can be very, very separate. Also, once they leave the church or move away from their faith, there's a sense of purposelessness, something that was very, very real for me when I resigned and walked away, resigned from the ministry and walked away from everything. Loneliness is not uncommon. There's a lack of belongingness. Sometimes I have this seminar that I do called Walking Between Worlds, which is working with LGBT people from faith backgrounds. And often they find it difficult. Well, they know that they don't going to fit in the church structure, but also they find it challenging to fit within the LGBT community because they think that they won't be accepting of their faith. Many will also experience relational and sexual difficulties because of the negatives around their sexual orientation or their sexual experiences, or find intimacy hard, or find it hard to really connect and be present with their partners, and the relationship breaks up. For some, there is also an unconscious, a subconscious, or unconscious belief that they will go to hell. The first time I came across this, I couldn't believe it. This person told me they were from a Pentecostal church in Sydney, and they said, you know, oh, look, I've accepted my sexuality, but I'm going to go to hell. And I thought, how terrible to be living with that belief about yourself. But that is not uncommon. We also need to realize that there are lots of cultural intersectionalities which can compound the conflict. So it could be that someone is from an Asian culture, for example, where the family is very, very strong influence upon the person. I mean, I know of Asian LGBT people which have still not come out to their parents at 45 because of the cultural limitations and restrictions and as that are loaded on top of a Christian belief system. So that can make that very challenging as well. And what we find that these impacts can be very much long-term. I was talking with a guy recently who this was happening to him as part of a program 30 years ago, and just now this is starting to really impact him psychologically. It's really quite tragic. There's this thing that I call closet hokey pokey as well. And I found that I went through this several times. So you go through this really intense cognitive dissonance where you can't deal with this anymore. I've got to come out, and then you start thinking about coming out, but then you think about all the consequences, the people you're going to hurt, what this is going to do to your faith, and so all these things, and then people will go back. So they go in and out of the closet hokey pokey. I think there's one more here. Yes, and of course, potential and real suicide, real suicidality. The figures are horrendous. We know that LGBTQ people are a much higher rate of suicidation and suicide than their heterosexual counterparts. I would say, and where people have not done research on this, but I would say that if you are from a faith background, that is compounded and multiplied. And we need to see more research on that, because I believe that LGBT people from faith backgrounds are one of the highest risk groups in our community in several key areas, suicide being one of them. Okay, so on our website, we actually have a page which has got all this information. There you will find research information and articles about conversion therapy or conversion practices. It's actually the largest collection of articles in Australia. If you at any time have a specific question or you need some information, please email me or make sure that you're pointed in the right direction. I can't believe it. I've got 2 minutes left, which is just perfect timing. So it's a day of miracles, hallelujah.
Thank you, Anthony.
I'm going to finish off with this. So I'm sure many of you get Facebook messages from strangers who or face friend requests, and I get them regularly, but I don't accept people. I have a cut and paste, which is essentially, thanks for the friend request. Look, you know, if I accepted everybody, I'd be over the 5,000 limit years ago. But there has to be some reason. Please feel free to let me know, and I will be more than happy to consider it. And so this guy from Pennsylvania sent me a message on a friend request on Facebook, and I sent him that message, and this is a response I got. He said, I just wanted you to know that you are an inspiration to me. What a beautiful way to open up the message. I've always been taught that God hates me. Between 14 and 30, I tried to get rid of the gay. I did informal programs with my pastors. I read awful workbooks. Then I did a 6-week camp at Love Wins, a program of Exodus International. When I turned 30, I realized the futility of those efforts. And around 32 to 33, I became happy that I was gay. I am now 34. Half of my life does seem wasted. Reading A Life of Unlearning assisted my mental health and acceptance for myself in a tangible way. I used to be on 6 antipsychotic drugs. Now I'm only on 1 mild antidepressant. Thank you. It truly did help. I made a lot of friends in conversion therapy. Out of 40, only 6 are still alive. 1 died naturally, the rest suicide. Your book gave me hope and let me see a truer Christ. Thank you, Matt. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we need to educate and inform and stop this nonsense that something is wrong with people who are LGBTQ, and for the church to learn to love and affirm and accept. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share this with you today.
Amen to that, Anthony. And amazing that you've worked with over 4,000 survivors of conversion practices over the last 20 years. Very, very impressive. We do have some questions for you. The first question I have says, from personal experience, I've often experienced when I've come out at church that I've been excluded from serving as a worship leader and deprived from enrolling as a soldier at corps because of my gender identity. Would you say this is a form of conversion therapy?
If we go back to the original definitions and that summary, that is, I have this meme that I created that went viral that starts off, so the church being anti-gay, to being welcoming, to being accepting, and then to be affirming. Some churches say they're welcoming and accepting, but there's always a but after it. Oh, you're welcome, but, or we accept you, but. And this person's asked this question has experienced themselves that rejection because of who they are. Yeah. This is terrible. We need to create safe and affirming spaces for LGBTQ people.
Brené Brown has a lovely saying that that churches and places of worship should be safe containers where we can be our real selves and able to, be messy or be open and honest about who we are and where we're at. So, yeah, I agree with you there. I have a comment here, if I may share that, from Colin. It says, not so much a question, but maybe useful to remind listeners that change is possible. We've experienced a 180-degree turn in New Zealand with the NZFTS territory, which supported the recent ban on conversion therapy. This is a first in the Salvation Army world and is a complete change from the 1986 when we promoted a national petition against law reform. God is at work. So that's good news.
Colin, you are so right. And we can focus on all the trauma and all the drama and forget that things are happening.
Another question for you. The Salvation Army in the USA provides counselling services for its officers, but they are often in the fields of biblical counselling / Christian counselling. The counsellors are professionals, but are often non-affirming. Are there any recommendations for seeking affirming forms of counselling, especially on the limited financial compensation that officers receive?
I'm not sure. So this person's speaking from the US, are they?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Right. So in some states, if a person is a qualified therapist and they are doing conversion style counseling, therapy, non-affirming, in other words, they can be struck off the books because of that. Because they're going against the ethics of the actual organisation, whether it be psychologists or psychiatrists or counsellors. Like, here's something, the Australian Christian Counsellors Association has banned conversion practices for all their counsellors and therapists. That's the Australian Christian Counsellors Association. It's good, isn't it?
It's great. It's fabulous.
Yeah. So I don't think I answered the person's question, did I?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have one deep curly question for you, if you're up for it. In your conversion therapy in Australia State of the Nation 2018 report, you describe what would happen to a teenager figuring out that they are gay and disclosing it to their youth group or pastor today, and the subtleties of the underlying beliefs that lead to suggestions such as praying for healing of it, casting out the spirit of homosexuality, saying God can heal your brokenness, inner healing ministries, some well-meaning couple at church or a course, etc., etc. And then you say this is RGCT of sorts, religious conversion therapy of sorts, but not the formal programs or organizations we've known in the past. It's not therapy as such. It's biblical, spiritual counseling within a church context that doesn't require any recognized mental health qualifications. But it's always been there and will be for some time. And then you say, how do you ban a religious belief system, and who takes responsibility for the abuse and harm? So I'm kind of throwing your questions back at you there.
Thank you. That was quite controversial when I wrote that report in 2018, because what was happening was people were going ban, 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 like the big cannon approach, but no one was sitting down and working out, how do we do this? We know the harm. And I think this is one of the big things we need to be working through, is that the average pastor, youth pastor, church leader, home group leader, these people do not know or are not aware of the terrible harm that they have caused to LGBTQ people. I would like to give them a look at my Excel spreadsheet. I would like to let them see some of the emails that I've got. And ministers, straight ministers that I know, which have engaged in this space, when they have acknowledged that they were ignorant about these things and that they wanted to learn and that they were becoming affirming, they were overwhelmed with the same sort of emails that I got. And they sat at their computers like I have done for years and wept. They are changed people. How do we get that understanding out to the average church leader, youth pastor, everything? We just have to keep getting it. I always say the enemy is ignorance. The enemy is ignorance. And sometimes we want to attack denominations, attack people. Our community is very good at that sometimes. But the true enemy is ignorance. And we need to get those messages out there and engage people.
And that kind of emphasizes with your whole, you're an ambassador, and that's your mission to do that bridge building.
I knew, Vicky, from, I used to preach in all the big mega churches, like Hillsong and all that. So I knew these were all my peers, the pastors in the big mega Pentecostal churches. And I knew that the very last thing that they would ever do is open the door to a gay activist. If they saw me as a gay activist, they wouldn't even open the door or answer or return my calls or anything, So their concept of that is militant, aggressive, angry, hostile, attacking. And I'm lovely. I'm beautiful. People like me, and I can be so nice. So,
well, you did say that you were very kind. Kindness is, like the fruit of the spirit you like to operate out of.
And that's how, Vicky, that's how I got to the final Exodus conference in 2013, when I asked Alan Chambers why he felt comfortable inviting me. He said to me, "You were kind to me."
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, is that all it takes?
Yeah, can't underestimate it, can you? And on that topic of Exodus, I have a question here from Chris. What led to the closure of Exodus?
I had a huge article on that that I wrote after the closure. There were several factors. There was a tipping point. The tipping point involved lots of failures. So Exodus actually created the people who brought it down in the end. Because there are all these people which have been through these programs, which have come out the other end and have realized how harmful and how damaging they were. And then they started to become advocates and activists, whatever they were doing. And so, that was a part of it, undermining of their credibility. John Polk, who was one of the poster boys, got caught in a gay bar in Washington. There was a shift in society as well, and so what was at one point Exodus message was relatively in line with what was happening in society, but society moved on, and that made Exodus's message more and more extreme, which caused them huge problems. So there were a couple of things, but there's an article on the website about the closure of Exodus and the tipping point.
Right, excellent. So where would you see conversion practices in LGBTQ pluses in the church in 10 to 20 years' time? How do you see that playing out?
Well, we have a dream.
Share your dream.
We have a dream. And the dream is, if you look at the progress, I'm 70 this year. So I've seen some changes in that time. There was no such thing as a gay Christian movement, even till 1968, a year before Stonewall. And now the gay Christian movement is huge. And now there are denominations which have fully embraced LGBT people. And there are denominations which have ministers which are LGBTQ. So, there's been transitions, there's been evangelicals which have come out and said, we were wrong, same-sex relationships, it's about love. It's what's in their hearts, it's not about the plumbing. and they've worked out these very, very simple things, and they've spoken out. They've often paid a price, but that's what happens. I often say, one step ahead, you're a leader. 2 steps ahead, you're an innovator. 3 steps ahead, you're a martyr. And depends what context you're in. Some people have paid the price. Maybe there are people within the Salvation Army, who have paid some price about trying to push this further. But there are ways to go about this, I think, that can minimize harm and damage. I worked with the Global YMCA with this and averted a major split within the movement by doing things thoughtfully, strategically, and progressively. So where do I see it in 10 years' time? That was a question, Vicky, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yeah.
I get sidetracked, don't I?
Well, I mean, just on your comment there, we have received a comment that we are called for such a time as this. We are Esthers, which kind of echoes what you're saying about, you know, the sacrifices and trying to move everything forward. But I'll let you continue answering that question.
Well, maybe I should just say that I am a queen.
That you're sorry?
That I'm a queen.
Yes.
Not Queen Esther, but you know.
Absolutely.
For such a time as this. What we are, it is a time when there will be movement. The challenging and frustrating things that's so slow is going to take time to build relationships, going to time to have conversations, time to put this in. But eventually, this will be pretty well a non-event. Eventually.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for as well. I have another question here for you. What practices can you encourage leaders to adopt in helping communities and groups, etc., pay attention to stories and pain?
That's good, isn't it? Well, you know, today Brad shared his story. It's often very challenging for survivors to share their stories. They need lots of support. So, you know, just run that question by me again, Vicky.
What practices can you encourage leaders to adopt in helping communities and groups pay attention to stories and pain?
Talk about them.
Talk about it?
Talk about it.
Yeah.
Make a conscious effort that, you know, let's say you're talking about refugees, you're talking about First Nations people, you know, and why would you not throw in at times when it's appropriate to talk about LGBTQ people, or, you know, people of different gender variants, you know, so that it becomes a part of the everyday conversation. People are hearing it regularly. That's a really, really important thing that I say to pastors who want to move their congregations to becoming affirming. You've got to start using the language from the pulpit. It's got to be part of the everyday language. Don't be silent about these things, because nothing will change. Two things are killers: silence and invisibility.
So communication.
Yeah.
Always the answer. Another question here: how can we in our local churches be safe places? In a church such as the Salvation Army, where we can't fully affirm people in same-sex relationships and membership because of international policy. Yeah, so how can we in our local church spaces be safe places?
It's challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, very.
Because, you know, like here in Australia, I'm married. If I'm married to my same-sex partner and we have kids and we go along to the local church and they say, oh, sorry, you know, we feel a bit uncomfortable about having your kids in our Sunday school, or, you know, or people don't realize how hurtful that is, how painful that is. No wonder people want to sue people when that happens, you know. It's just too painful. So to create, I think you need to talk to the people themselves. Have some very honest conversations. What is it that we can do for you? What is it that will make you safe, you know? And if you feel you need to walk away because our denomination is not affirming, we will understand that, but we would love to have you as a part of our family, as a part of our journey, so that we might model Jesus Christ in this place.
Just to follow on from that related question, how do we help people who've experienced conversion practices heal? What helped you in your process, Anthony?
I've been thinking about writing about this, Vicky, because, you know, like it took me some time to realise that I actually have PTSD. I thought PTSD was something that veterans in the war got, and then, you know, discovered that actually, you know, got complex PTSD. So I've had to learn to manage that. I think that I'm very, very fortunate. Like, I've seen people come into this game, come and go, and the PTSD is what gets them, and they can't continue. But here I am 20 years later, and relatively sane, I think, I hope. And not bitter and twisted. So for survivors, they will need lots of understanding and acceptance. And if they need to sit with their pain and their stories, then you may need to do that. You may need to do that more than once. And a lot of it is not about trying to fix them. Just to be there and have that listening ear. And it's okay to say, you know what? I really can't comprehend how horrific that was. You know, I could tell you about standing on a cliff edge the night before I was going to do the public confession in front of 800 people. And, you know, to tell you about that and to be very honest about what was happening for me, it would be hard for many people to really get what that's about. But, you know, to have someone willing just to quietly listen and be there in a loving, compassionate space could be very, very powerful. And not to advise me.
Yeah.
Advice givers, oh dear. God deliver us from advice givers.
Did you have a favorite Bible verse or passage that helps you through any of this by chance? Or that helps you in your day-to-day walk now? I don't know.
So what happened for me was, because when I walked away from everything, there was nothing in my mind and nobody in my world who said you could be gay and a Christian.
Right.
So after 22 years of struggling, trying to change, I was tired. I was so exhausted. I was devastated, and I'd fallen in love with this guy. And I want. It's not about sex. It's about love, and I wanted that, but there was no reconciliation in my mind. So the Bible went in the bottom drawer. I didn't go to church again. I didn't pray. I didn't do anything for years. Yeah. And I was in no man's land spiritually. So one thing, the thing that started to change for me was that I was doing a personal development course.
Yep.
And this personal development course had a lot of spiritual principles in it. And I'm reading this stuff and going, I know, it's like, this is what I used to preach on. This is all good, positive stuff. And I had this moment where I went, oh, I wonder if I threw the baby out with the bathwater. I wonder if I could just be gay and accept that and have all the beautiful things that I had in a relationship with God. And I remember that night, I prayed for the first time in 6 years. It was long, probably 7 years. And I said, God, we're on speaking terms again. Yeah. I don't know what's happening here, but okay, we're talking again. Of course, I was not, I thought I was going to go to hell. I planned to commit suicide at 50. That was the plan.
But God changed that.
I'm still here.
Yay, we're pleased you're still here, Anthony, very pleased.
Still here. Yeah, interesting journey from then on about, I never looked at the Bible verses, I'm not, like most people, you just read any of this translation of the Bible. You have you don't even know that in 1946 was the first time that, the word homosexual appeared in his translation of the Bible. You know nothing about the historical cultural context of Leviticus or the Sodom and Gomorrah story or what was going on, in Corinth, So I educated myself and went, oh my God, I just believed all this stuff all these years and never ever questioned it. That was wrong.
Earlier today, in the Kathy Bulldog session, there was Chris came up with a T-shirt that said, oh no, hang on, that was session 2 actually, about if you can't, you need to doubt to have faith, that you can't have faith without doubting, basically. Yeah.
I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned.
Yeah. Great stance. Great stance. Well, thank you, Anthony. I think we're going to wrap up the Q&A there.
Thank you. You're wonderful people. Do you know that every single one of you, let me put my gallery view on so I can, yeah. Oh, you're all wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people. Keep up the good work. I love you dearly.
Yeah. Over to you, Katie.
We definitely want to say a big thank you, Anthony. This has been such a great space, and really want to encourage you guys, if you have questions, if you're looking for more details, jump onto Anthony's organization site and check it out. I've been reading his book, which I cannot recommend high enough. There is a warning in the front. Some of it gets pretty intense, doesn't it, Anthony? Pretty detailed.
Yeah.
But I am loving the journey that you take us on, and it's incredible. I have to keep reminding myself, this is your story. Like, you didn't make this up. You lived this. Yeah. So definitely really encourage you guys to grab his book and have a look. So we're gonna finish up our session. We will have breakout rooms that are going to happen in a few moments. This is an optional thing for you to stick around and just chat a bit more about some of this stuff, help us kind of digest all we've been talking about. So there will be a screen that will come up with a countdown, so you can grab tea or coffee or have a toilet break and then come on back. But we're aware this may have been a bit of a heavy subject for some. So we are absolutely privileged and honoured to have a very talented man join us today to share a really beautiful song with us. So we want to invite Jason Simmons is going to sing a great song, and I really want to encourage you as he sings this over all of us, that you just take a moment to have a breath, just to slow down and allow yourself just to process all that's gone on and really receive this beautiful. I had like 2 bars of it and I already had goosebumps and it was amazing. So thank you, Jason.
We feel, we hear your pain, your fear, but we're here to say who you are is okay, and you don't have to go through this on your own. You're not alone. You have more friends than you know. Some who surround you, some you are destined to meet. You'll have more love in your life. Don't let go, give it time. more time to grow. It's gonna be okay. You have more friends than you know. Be brave, be strong. You are loved, you belong. Someday soon you will see you're exactly who you're supposed to be. And you don't have to go through this on your own. You're not alone. You have more friends than you know. Some who surround you, some you are destined to meet. You have more love in your life. Don't let go, give it time, take it slow. Those who love you the most may need more time to grow. It's gonna be okay. You have more friends than you know. Be who you are, learn to forgive. It's not about who you love, but how you live. You have more friends than you know. Some who surround you, some you are destined to meet. You have more love in your life. Don't let go, give it time, take it slow. Those who love you the most may need more time to grow. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. You have more friends than you know. More friends than you know. God bless you.